Harland was at the counting house this morning, Bess said. Early. That means he wants something. Ida's needle moved through the salt-stained jacket without stopping. Straight stitch. Pull taut. Advance. She knew this jacket by its wear. Left shoulder dropped. Right pocket stretched from rope. She had mended it twice before and would mend it again. He always wants something, she said. That is not news. He was writing in the ledger. Bess folded her arms against the rain. She leaned against the fishmonger's stall next door, watching the harbor with the patience of a woman who had outlasted harder things than weather. Your page. The needle stopped for half a second, resumed. The stitch was even. I am telling you because nobody else will, Bess said. He is raising your rate again. He raised it last month, and he will raise it next month, and the month after that, until you cannot pay and he takes the house. Bess's voice was flat, not unkind. That is how he works. You know that. Ida finished the seam. She smoothed it with her thumb. The pressure even. The motion deliberate. She set the jacket on the rail to collect and reached for the next piece. She did not answer because the answer was a number she had already calculated, and the number did not work. Harland arrived 20 minutes later. He carried his ledger under one arm, wrapped in oilcloth against the rain. The ledger was drier than Ida's work table. He did not greet her. He opened the ledger on her table as though it were his table, which in the way that mattered, it was. The seamstress owes 4 shillings and 6 for the month, he said. The rate has adjusted. Ida set down her needle. The rate was 3 and 8 last month. You said it would hold through spring. The rent increased. I passed the cost along. He adjusted his spectacles. That is how lending works. The rent did not increase. Bess's voice carried from the stall without effort. I pay the same landlord. My rate has not moved. Harland did not look at Bess. He turned instead toward the 2 merchants sheltering under the awning across the lane. She sews patches on rags, he said, addressing them as though Ida were not present. That is not a trade. That is begging with a needle. The merchants did not laugh. They did not correct him either. He wrote the new figure in the ledger, 4 and 6. The ink was still wet when he closed it. A dock worker arrived then. Ida's morning client, come for his mended trousers. He reached into his coat and produced not coins but a wrapped parcel. Salt fish and a half loaf. Ida took it. Thank you, Mr. Coyle, she said. Harland looked at the parcel. The payment is 4 and 6 in coin, not goods. He let the pause sit. I do not accept mackerel, Miss Cruz. Ida's hand tightened on the parcel. The paper crinkled. Her jaw set, and her throat worked once, swallowing the response she could not afford to give. She looked at the number in the closed ledger. She looked at the fish in her hands. Bess said. Loud enough for the merchants and the rain, and possibly the whole harbor. 4 and 6 for a porch with no roof and a door that does not latch. Harland, you are a generous man. He left without acknowledging her. The rain continued. The afternoon brought no more clients. Bess closed the stall early and went home. Ida sat alone on the porch with the fish parcel and the arithmetic and the sound of water hitting the tin roof above her head. The stranger appeared at the end of the lane when the light had gone gray and flat. He walked with the gait of a laborer and the posture of someone who had never carried a load. His coat was dark and heavy and torn from collar to waist on the left side. A clean tear, not a working tear. Something sharp had done it. Something deliberate. He stepped onto the porch. He was taller than the doorframe required him to be careful about. Can you mend this? He pulled the coat off and held it out. His shirt underneath was plain, but the weave was too fine for a dock worker. She took the coat without comment and spread it across her knees. The tear was clean. She had mended enough dock workers to know the difference between a nail and a blade. She threaded her needle and began. Midway through the repair, she turned the coat to access the interior seam. The lining was dark silk, wrong for a laborer's coat, wrong for any coat that had ever been near this harbor. And there, worked into the silk in thread so close to the fabric color, it was nearly invisible. A crown. A crest. An emblem she did not recognize, but whose craftsmanship she knew immediately. This was not decoration. This was identity stitched into cloth. He saw her see it. The shadows under the porch roof shifted. The temperature dropped. She felt it in her fingers, in the needle, in the thread that suddenly resisted the pull. His eyes changed. Gray-green to something darker, something with a faint edge of crimson at the rim. He was perfectly still. Ida looked at the crest, looked at him. She said, "Your coat is torn. I am fixing your coat. Whatever is under it is not my business." He did not move for 3 full seconds. Then, "It has been a very long time since someone saw and chose not to ask." She finished the stitch, cut the thread with her teeth, smoothed the seam with her thumb. She handed the coat back. Their hands met in the exchange, and she felt it immediately. Not cold, the way a man is cold in rain. Ice. The cold of something that had not carried warmth in a very long time. She pulled her hand back. She did not ask. He put the coat on. He reached into his pocket and set 3 sovereigns on the work table. She stared at them. 3 sovereigns would clear 2 months of Harlan's rate. "The mend is 6pence, she said. "The silence is worth more." He did not leave. He stood at the edge of the porch and watched the harbor, and Ida watched him not leave. The rain fell past the porch edge. It did not touch him where he stood, she noticed. She filed it next to the fingers that never warmed, and the crown in the lining, and the eyes that had shifted color. Bess returned from closing the stall, saw the stranger, saw the sovereigns, saw Ida's expression. She looked at all 3 in sequence with the efficiency of a woman who had spent 30 years reading a market. "New client?" she said. "He overpaid," Ida said. "Then he wants something else." Bess settled against the post. "They always do." She was right. The stranger turned from the harbor. "I need to travel the coast road to Greymarsh," he said. 3 days. I need to look like a man traveling with his wife, a laborer and a seamstress." "Why?" Ida said. "Because a man alone on that road draws attention. A man with a woman who mends his coat does not. You are asking me to pretend to be your wife. I am asking you to mend things on a road instead of mending them on a porch. The pay is the same per day. 3 sovereigns." Bess, who had not been invited into this conversation and had never let that stop her, said, 3 sovereigns a day to walk a road with a stranger whose coat has a crown in it. What could go wrong? It was not a question. Ida looked at the ledger number in her head. 4 and 6, every month, increasing. She looked at the sovereigns. She looked at his hands, cold and still, the hands of a man who did not work with them but was pretending to. She said, "What is your name?" He said, "Leander." "And the crown in the lining, Leander?" A pause. Old cloth, old history. She considered this. It was not an answer. It was the shape of an answer, which was a different thing entirely. She had been reading the difference between real fabric and imitation long enough to know it by touch. "I leave at dawn," she said. "I carry my own needle." The shadows on the porch deepened as the evening settled, but they deepened toward him, not away from the light. The rain did not reach him where he stood. Ida noticed both things. She smoothed the finished seam on the mended coat with her thumb, the gesture automatic, the steadying real. 3 gold sovereigns sat on her scarred work table. Her needle and thread lay beside them. The rain fell past the porch edge in a steady curtain. The stranger with the crown and his lining stood in the shadow where the water did not fall, watching the harbor go dark. Dawn came to the harbor the way it always did, sideways, gray, smelling of salt, and the night's catch already being sorted on the docks. Ida was on the coast road before the fishing boats had finished unloading. Leander was already there. He stood at the road's edge where the lane met the cliff path, wearing the mended coat, carrying nothing. She had her canvas kit over one shoulder, needle case, thread, linen patches, the shears wrapped in cloth so they would not catch. She looked at his empty hands. "You have no bag. I travel light," he said. "You travel empty. No food, no water, no bedroll. I have arrangements ahead." She accepted this the way she accepted the hands that stayed winter-cold indoors and the crown in the lining, filed it, set it aside, walked on. The road was narrow, and the cliff edge was close, and the wind came off the water with the smell of kelp and wet stone. She pulled her kit strap straight across her shoulder, the steadying motion. They walked side by side. A laborer and his wife were close enough for the road. After a mile, they passed a stone marker. Old, weathered, the inscription worn to nothing. Leander said, "That marker is from the Turnpike Act, 1760. The original road ran closer to the cliff before the landslip of 1793. She looked at him. He did not elaborate. He knew this road the way she knew the weave of a fabric, from the inside, from years of handling it. She smoothed the strap of her kit with her thumb and said nothing. The shadows along the cliff edge leaned toward him as they walked. She noticed that too. At midday, they stopped at a coaching inn at a crossroads. Corner table, low ceiling, the smell of tallow and boiled mutton. He ordered food for her. He ordered nothing for himself. "You are not eating," she said. "I ate before we left." "You did not. You were at the road's edge before dawn. Nothing in the harbor was open." She set down her spoon. "I am a seamstress. I notice what things are made of. Food, cloth, lies. They all have a weave. Yours is showing." He looked at her steadily. His eyes were gray-green and gave nothing away. The candle on the table guttered. There was no draught. The shadows in the corner behind him thickened. The innkeeper's wife brought bread and broth and stepped back half a pace when she set it down. Unconscious, instinctive, the way a person moves away from cold air without knowing why. Ida wrapped both hands around the bowl. The warmth was good. She held it longer than she needed to. She was 3 days' walk from the only porch she had, with a man who did not eat, and Harlan's number was still in her head. 4 and 6. She took a breath that shook slightly at the end. She steadied it by measuring a length of thread against her forearm. The motion automatic. The steadying real. Leander watched her hands. He said, "You do that when you are unsettled." "Do what?" "Measure thread against your arm. There is no thread in your hand." She looked down. He was right. Her forearm was bare. The gesture had been pure habit, pure containment, with nothing in it. Old habit, she said. No, he said. New fear. There is a difference. She picked up her spoon. Eat something, Leander. Or at least pretend. We are supposed to be traveling together. He reached for the bread. He broke it. He did not eat it. He set the pieces down in a pattern that looked like eating without being it. She watched him do this and said nothing, because it was the most honest thing she had seen him do since the porch. The afternoon road narrowed where the hedgerow crowded close. Leander walked ahead through a tight section, and a branch caught his sleeve, opening a scratch on the back of his hand. She saw it clearly. A clean line, red, the kind that stings. She watched it close. Not scab, not clot. The skin sealed like a seam being pressed flat. In under a minute there was nothing. No mark, no redness, nothing. He turned back and saw her looking at his hand. It was not deep, he said. It was not there 10 seconds ago either. Silence. The wind carried salt and something colder underneath. Mineral, deep, like the air inside a stone crypt. She had been in a stone crypt once, helping a widow lay out her husband. She knew what that cold felt like. Leander said, "You see a great deal, Miss Cruz. I see what is in front of me. I do not invent what is not." She kept walking. "What do you see when you look at me?" He was quiet for long enough that she thought he would not answer. Then, "A woman who reads material the way a physician reads skin. Fiber, weave, weight, wear pattern. You looked at my coat for 30 seconds before you threaded the needle. And what did the coat tell me? That I was lying about what I am." "Yes," she said. "It did." She did not ask the next question. She could feel it sitting between them on the road like a stone neither of them wanted to step on. She walked around it. He walked around it. They continued toward Graymarsh. The barn that night smelled of old straw and lantern oil. Ida sat against the wall with her sewing kit open. A dock worker's shirt she had brought from home, unfinished work, and she stitched by lantern light because her hands needed something to do. Leander sat on the far side of the barn. He had not moved in 20 minutes. He did not shift, did not adjust, did not breathe visibly. He watched her hands work. "You are staring," she said. "Your hands are the only thing in this barn that is moving. Yours are not. They have not needed to move for a very long time." She tied off the stitch, cut the thread, folded the shirt. She looked at him across the lantern, the still form, the coat that she had mended, the shadows gathered behind him like something waiting. "How long?" she said. "Longer than the road. Longer than the inn. Longer than anything you have touched today." She set the folded shirt on her kit. She looked at the lantern flame. She said, "I am not going to ask what you are." "Why?" "Because you are paying me to walk beside you, not to interrogate you." He was quiet. Then, "That is not why." "No," she said. "It is not." She picked up the shirt again, smoothed the finished seam with her thumb. "It is because whatever you are, you needed someone to mend your coat. And you sat on my porch in the rain and waited while I did it. Whatever comes with a crown in the lining, I have seen worse at 4 and 6 a month." The lantern flame steadied. The shadows settled. He almost smiled. It was the almost that stayed with her. Morning brought Graymarsh and a boy running up the road with a folded letter. Ida opened it. She knew Harlan's handwriting before she read the words. She had read his figures on every invoice for 2 years. The letter said he had been informed she had taken a private commission outside the harbor. The terms of her debt required full accounting of all earnings from trade on her return. The rate was now 5 shillings. Her hands closed on the letter. The paper creased under her grip. Leander watched her hands. "Who is it from?" "The man who owns my porch." "No one owns a porch. They own the debt on it. It is the same thing." She folded the letter into her kit. She took out a needle and a scrap of linen and made 3 straight stitches into nothing. The containment motion, the steadying rhythm. Leander watched her stitch air. He said, "What does a seamstress do when the thread is pulled from both ends?" "She ties a knot." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "He raised the rate. He always raises the rate. That is how he works." She put the needle away. "It does not change anything. We continue to Greymarsh." But it did change something. She could feel it in the arithmetic she could not stop doing. Sovereigns against the new rate. Months against the total. The number that still did not work no matter how she arranged it. In the Greymarsh market, a man at the chandlery stall recognized Leander, not as a king, as something. He stared too long, with the particular stillness of a man who has seen something he should not have and is deciding what to do about it. Leander went still, the stillness of something that has been tracked before and knows the sensation. He took Ida's arm. His grip was cold through her sleeve. He said quietly, "Walk with me. Do not look back. Talk about the mending." She said, without missing a beat, "The shoulder seam on your coat is holding, but the hem needs reinforcement before it frays. I would use a double stitch if you would stand still long enough." They moved through the market. She talked about stitches. He steered them through the crowd with the precision of someone who had navigated hostile ground for centuries. The shadows between the market stalls stretched toward him as they passed. She felt the cold radiating from his arm through the fabric of her sleeve. They reached the far side of the market. He released her arm. "Thank you," he said. "For what? Describing hem repair?" "For not freezing." "I do not freeze," she said. "I stitch." But her hand was shaking where he had held it. She gripped the strap of her kit until the tremor stopped. She did not let him see. That evening, in the inn-room they had taken as man and wife, separate beds, her kit on the chair between them, Leander went out. She did not ask where. She sat alone with Harlan's letter and the sovereigns and the arithmetic that would not resolve. She did it again. Sovereigns against the new rate. 3 months, perhaps 4 if she was careful. Then back to the porch. Nothing changed. She was still mending, still paying. The road had been 3 days of walking beside a man who needed a costume, not a companion. She had provided the costume and called it work, and told herself the number was the point. Her hands dropped to her lap. The needle fell from her fingers onto the floor. She did not pick it up. She stared at it on the wooden boards. Her eyes filled. She did not wipe them. She said to the empty room, "You are a patch on his story. That is all." Her voice cracked on the last word. She sat in the silence with the needle on the floor and the letter in her kit and the arithmetic that did not work. The shadows in the room pressed inward from the corners. The candle dimmed. She did not know he was standing in the corridor outside. She did not know he had heard every word. He did not enter. He stood in the dark and listened, and the shadows around him deepened until the corridor was black. When he came back into the room, she had picked up the needle. She was stitching, not mending anything, just stitching into a scrap of linen, the motion itself the point. Her eyes were red. He saw. She knew he saw. She did not pretend otherwise. "When we reach wherever you are going," she said, "and you do not need a seamstress walking beside you anymore, what happens to me? You go home. Home is a porch with a debt on it, and a man who calls my work begging." Her voice broke on the last word. She gripped the linen hard, and the needle went through with enough force to prick her finger. She did not flinch. She watched the bead of red form on her fingertip. Leander's eyes shifted, gray-green to crimson in a single beat. The shadows in the room surged, the candle extinguished. He took one step back. He gripped the doorframe. His knuckles were white against the wood. "Cover your hand," he said through clenched teeth. She wrapped her finger in the scrap of linen. The crimson faded from his eyes. Slowly, she watched it go. "Vampire King," she said. He did not confirm. He did not deny. He said, "You should not have seen that." "I see everything. That is what a seamstress does. We see the thread, the tear, the patch, and what is underneath." She paused. "I have known since the porch. I chose not to name it because it was not mine to name." The shadows settled. He released the doorframe. He said, "You are not a patch on my story." She looked at him. Her finger was wrapped in linen. The needle was still in her other hand. Harlan's letter was visible in her open kit on the chair. "Then what am I?" she said. He said, "You are the first person in decades who looked at my coat and not my crown." She held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she looked down at the needle in her hand. She set it carefully on the kit. She smoothed the linen scrap over her pricked finger. She did not answer him, because the answer was something she had not yet decided whether she could afford. She had learned a long time ago not to spend what she could not replace. She said, "Good night, Leander." She lay down on her bed with her kit beside her, and her eyes open, and the shadows quiet in the corners of the room. He remained in the doorway for a long moment. Then he stepped back into the dark of the corridor, and she heard nothing after that. No footstep, no creak of board, no sound of a man settling for the night. Only the harbor outside, and the tide, and the arithmetic she could not stop. Morning came the way mornings do after sleepless nights, not with drama, but with the slow, gray insistence of light through a salt-crusted window. Ida was already sitting up when the harbor sounds began below. She had not slept. She had stitched and thought and stitched again, and the scrap of linen in her kit was now covered in straight lines going nowhere. She heard nothing from the corridor. She had heard nothing all night. She packed her kit with the same order she always used: needle case first, then thread, then shears, then patches. The letter from Harlan she folded into the smallest square it would make and pressed it to the bottom. When she opened the door, Leander was standing at the end of the corridor by the window. He was wearing the mended coat. He was looking at the harbor. He did not turn when she stepped out. "You did not sleep," he said. "Neither did you." "I do not sleep." He turned then. His eyes were gray-green and steady. The crimson was gone. "I should have told you that before the barn." "You should have told me a great many things before the barn," she said. "But I did not ask, and you did not offer. And here we are. He held her gaze. Here we are. She shifted the strap of her kit on her shoulder. How far to the harbor? 2 hours on the coast road. Then we should walk. They went down the inn stairs and out into the morning without another word, and the shadows on the road leaned toward him as they always did, and she filed it the way she filed everything. Carefully, in order, in the place where she kept things she had not yet decided what to do with. The walk back was quieter than the walk out. Not uncomfortable. The silence had changed texture. It was the silence of two people who have said the hard thing and are now living alongside it. Halfway along the cliff road, she said, "The crown in the lining. Is it your actual crown?" He was quiet for a moment. "It is the mark of what I am. Not a crown you can hold. A designation." "Vampire King," she said, the same way she might say the name of a stitch. Flat, precise, not afraid. "Yes." "And the road. You know every stone of it." "I have walked it for a very long time," she nodded. She smoothed the strap of her kit with her thumb, the steadying motion, the one that meant she was thinking. "And Greymarsh, whatever you needed there, is settled," he said. "It is done." "Good," she said. And she meant it. And he heard that she meant it. And neither of them said anything else until the harbor came into view below the cliff. The smell of kelp and salt and coal smoke reached her before the rooftops did. The smell of home, such as it was. She did not slow her pace. She went down the road toward the harbor with her kit over her shoulder and her chin level and her hands steady. She did not let herself think about Harlan's letter until she could see the porch. He was already there. Harlan stood at her work table with his ledger open. Two merchants sheltered under the awning across the lane, the same two who had stood there when he called her work begging. Bess was at the fishmonger's stall, arms folded, watching Harlan with the expression she reserved for things that smelled wrong. Harlan saw Ida coming from the coast road. He saw the man beside her. He saw the coat, mended, fine, the coat of someone with resources. His eyes moved to Leander and stayed there, calculating. "Miss Cruz," he said, "you have been on a private commission. I require a full accounting of earnings received. The adjusted rate is 5 shillings per month plus a surcharge for—" Leander stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He said, "I have purchased your ledger." Harlan stopped. Leander reached into the mended coat and produced a folded document. He said, "Every debt you hold in this harbor, every name, every amount, every adjusted rate. I purchased the lot this morning through a solicitor in Greymarsh. The total was less than you might think. You were not a very good lender, Mr. Harlan." Harlan's face drained. He reached for his ledger, the book he had carried like a weapon for years. His hands shook. Leander placed the folded document on Ida's work table, beside her needle and thread. He said, "The debts belong to Miss Cruz now. All of them, including yours to her." Bess, leaning against the fishmonger's stall, said, "Harlan, you look pale. Sit down before you fall. Although personally, I would prefer you fell." Harlan looked at Leander. He looked at Ida. He looked at the document on the table. His own figures, his own names, purchased out from under him while he stood on her porch waiting to collect. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Ida picked up the document. She opened it, read the figures, every name she knew: dock workers, laundry women, the chandler, the baker, Bess herself, all of them released. She looked at Harland. He was standing with his empty ledger and his soft hands and his good cloth that suddenly looked like a costume. She tore the document in half, then in quarters. "I owe you nothing," she said. "I never did." The merchants watched. The same merchants who had stood under the awning when he called her trade begging. They watched her tear the paper and they did not look away. Harland reached for his ledger. The remaining pages, the debts he thought he still held. Leander said, "Those are purchased as well. Every page, every name. You will find that your counting house has no clients as of this morning. I suggest you find a trade. Perhaps Miss Cruz can teach you to mend." Harland's hands clutched the empty ledger. He looked at the merchants. They did not meet his eyes. He walked away from the porch. He did not look back. Bess watched him go. She said, "That is the first time I have seen him leave without writing something down." She paused. "I think I enjoyed it." Ida set the torn paper on the table. She looked at her hands. They were steady. She had not expected them to be steady. Leander stood at the edge of the porch. He said nothing. He was watching her, not Harland's retreating back. "You did that in Greymarsh," she said. "That was the business you had there." "Yes. You could have told me. You would have refused." She thought about it. "Yes," she said. "I would have." She looked at the torn paper. "I still might have preferred to refuse." "I know," he said. "That is why I did not ask." Bess looked between them with the expression of a woman who has seen a great deal and intends to see more. She said, "Someone should put the kettle on. I will do it, since neither of you appears capable of ordinary function at present." She disappeared into the house. Ida sat down on her low stool. The same porch, the same smell of salt and wood, and the faint lanolin of old wool. She put her kit on the table and opened it. Needle case, thread, shears, patches, all in order. She said, "Sit down. You are making the porch feel crowded." He sat. On the step, not the stool, there was only one stool. He folded his long frame onto the step and rested his arms on his knees and looked at the harbor. She threaded her needle, measured the thread against her forearm by eye, began a new seam on a dock worker's jacket that had been waiting since before she left. After a while, she said, "What happens now?" He said, "That depends on what you want." "I want a porch that does not leak," she said. "I want to be paid in coin for work that is worth coin. I want Bess to stop worrying about me, because she has enough to worry about." She pulled the thread through. "I want to not do arithmetic in my head every night before I sleep." "Those are achievable," he said. "And you?" she said. "What do you want?" He was quiet for a moment. The shadows on the porch were still, not gathered, not pressing, just present the way shadows are. He said, "I have been walking roads for a very long time. I have worn a great many coats. None of them were made for me." He looked at his hands. "I would like to stay somewhere long enough to need a coat made for the weather." She looked at him. She looked at the mended coat on his shoulders, the one with the crown in the lining, the one she had stitched in the rain on this same porch 3 days ago. She said, "That coat will not last another winter. The lining is already separating at the shoulder." "I know," he said. "I could make you another one," she said. "A proper one. Not silk. Canvas. The the kind that holds up in harbor weather. He looked at her. Something in his face shifted. Not the crimson, not the shadows. Something quieter than that. He said, "I would like that." Bess came back with tea. Strong, no ceremony. She set a cup beside Ida and looked at Leander and said, "I have not got a cup for you because I suspect you do not drink tea. Am I wrong?" "You are not wrong," he said. "Good," said Bess. "I dislike being wrong. It wastes time." She settled herself against the doorframe with her own cup. "So, the man with the crown in his coat is staying." Ida said, "I did not say that." Bess said, "You offered to make him a coat. That is the same thing." Ida pulled the thread through and did not answer, because Bess was not wrong, and they both knew it. The afternoon passed in the ordinary way of afternoons on the porch. 3 dock workers came with mending. Ida worked through them steadily. A torn shoulder seam, a frayed hem, a pocket that had given up entirely. She quoted prices in coin. She was paid in coin. The arithmetic was simple, and it worked, and she let herself feel the plainness of that. Leander sat on the step. He did not move much. He watched the harbor. Occasionally he said something about the road, or the tide, or the age of a particular stone wall, and she listened without looking up from her work. Bess listened from the stall next door, and occasionally said something sharp and accurate that made Ida's mouth curve. In the late afternoon, Ida went inside and came back with her good canvas, the heavy dock cloth she kept for serious work. She spread it across her knees and began to cut. Leander watched her hands. He said, "What are you making?" "A coat," she said. "For whom?" "For the man who sat on my porch in the rain," she said. "Not for the crown underneath. For the man." She worked through the last of the light. The seams were straight, the shoulders reinforced, the hem double-stitched so it would hold against harbor wind and salt and the particular punishment of a man who had been walking roads for centuries and would likely continue to do so. Into the collar lining she worked her mark. Not a crown, not a crest. A single straight stitch in red thread. Her signature. The thing that made a garment hers. She held the coat up, looked at it. Then she handed it to him. He put it on. The canvas sat differently than silk. Heavier, more present. The weight of honest material on a body that had worn pretense for a very long time. He stood on the porch in dock canvas in the evening light, and he looked like a man. Not a king, not a creature of centuries and shadow. A man in a good coat made by hands that knew what real work felt like. Ida's eyes filled. She turned to the work table and picked up her needle. The thread would not go through the eye. She tried twice. "Set the needle down," he said. "This is the first coat in 2 centuries that was made for who I am, not what I am." She did not trust her voice immediately. She smoothed the edge of the work table with her thumb, the steadying motion, the one that meant she was thinking, or feeling, or both at once. Then she said, "It will need letting out at the seams in a year. Canvas stretches." "I will come back," he said. "I know," she said. Bess from the stall said without looking up from closing her shutters, "You know, the stitching on that coat is the best work you have ever done." Ida said, "Which coat?" Bess said, "Both of them." The harbor went quiet the way it does at the end of a working day. Not silent, but settled. The light dropped to gold and then to gray. The old mended coat hung on the porch rail where Ida had placed it that morning. the crown in its lining invisible from the outside. The repair she had made in the rain still holding, straight and even. She threaded her needle. The thread went through on the first try. She measured it against her forearm by eye, cut it, and began the next mend. A fisherman's cap with a split crown, left by a man who would collect it in the morning. Leander stood at the edge of the porch where the shadow began. He was wearing the canvas coat. The shadows behind him were quiet, settled, present the way shadows always are, but not pressing, not gathering, just there. Bess brought a second cup of tea and set it beside Ida without comment. She looked at Leander. She looked at the old coat on the rail. She said, "I suppose you will want supper." "I do not eat," he said. "I know that," said Bess. "I was talking to Ida." She looked at Ida. "Salt fish and bread, same as always." "Same as always," Ida said. Her hands pulled thread through canvas in the evening light. The harbor settled into its night sounds. The tide moved in the way tides do, without asking, without hurrying, without stopping for arithmetic or debt, or the particular weight of a long day finally ending. Bess set the bread and fish on the table beside the needle case and said, "Eat before it gets cold. The fish does not improve with waiting."